Welcome everyone to Enterprise.Expert. Today's episode is in-depth item analysis with QuickBooks Enterprise Advanced Reporting. Today is August 16th, 2017, and this is the August 2017 monthly webinar of Enterprise.Expert. Today's content we'll introduce our webinar series real quick, talk about other recommended events that we're involved with. We'll spend a few minutes talking about what learning resources are available out there to learn QBAR, QuickBooks Enterprise Advanced Reporting, and that's something really, really important that you should know. That QBAR, it's a short moniker for QuickBooks Enterprise Advanced Reporting. So we're going to use QBAR instead of QuickBooks Enterprise Advanced Reporting basically interchangeably. So we'll spend about 5 minutes talking about the resources that are out there to learn, and then we'll do a demo of an in-depth item analysis report using QBAR with our guest speaker, Robert Hawkins, who's basically my #1 resource for QBAR, and then we'll spend a few minutes with Q&A at the end. Now, what is Enterprise.Expert? We're a community of experts in the enterprise level technology. We're focused a little bit on QuickBooks for the first year or so, but we're going to move beyond QuickBooks once we cover all the QuickBooks Enterprise related topics. We congregate in these live webinars. Some people watch the recorded YouTube videos. We have a website blog, which is enterprise.expert, no www.com, and possibly where we're busiest is in our Facebook group. So if you just search Enterprise Expert or Enterprise.Expert in the Facebook group, you can join that and we can continue the conversation there. Almost everyone there is eager to ask and share their knowledge. So anyway, this webinar series happens every month. It's not a CPE webinar series, so I know a lot of accountants tend to join in. We don't give CPE or advanced credit. The reason for that is because we want the topics to be a little bit loose and not sort of strict to what continuing education credits would be. And like as I mentioned, our primary focus is QuickBooks Enterprise 2017 and then 2018, which will be next month webinar. And then we're going to start moving into QuickBooks apps and then possibly some non-Intuit related software as well. About myself, the host, my name is Hector Garcia. I'm the CEO of Active CPA, which is an integrated technology consulting practice. We have an office in Miami and we have a partner office in LA. I could call Rob a partner office in the New York area. I haven't put it on the slide, but pretty much is because our guest speaker, Rob, is the one that I send all my QBAR custom report work to. There's my email. If you have any questions, I'm pretty good at answering emails. So I'm pretty accessible to folks that watch this webinars and videos. About our guest, Robert Hawkins from Hawkins Financial. He's in the New York, Connecticut area. This is the only picture I was able to find from him online, him on a boat. I don't know if he does the reports while he's boating or not. I'm not really sure, but that's the picture that he has out there. And he's a data and analytics and management reporting expert. His email, robert@qbkaccounting.com. That's actually my domain name. It forwards straight to him, and you will be dealing with him directly if you have any questions. Before you go into the presentation, I want to show one more slide, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So this slide that you're seeing here is 3 particular resources. You should probably take a picture of this or download the slides from the handout section, and you will get on the email blast when we send all the emails with a copy of the recording, these links as well. But I want to show you 3 resources that are out there for free. Let me go ahead and switch over to my browser. So one of them is qbar.intuitlabs.com. This is Intuit's official resource page for QBAR Advanced Reporting. Now, I'll tell you, I will be a harsh critic of Intuit. This is extremely light from my taste, but it does have a few things. It's got about 6 hours worth of video. So this first basic, intermediate, and advanced video. So there's some in-depth learning there. It does have some files you can download to kind of practice. You got this section that says starter reports, where you can download some of these reports and kind of open them and play with them, because these are already pre-coded in there. And they're on the resources. There's basically the user guide. Again, it hasn't been updated for 2 years, but it is functional. And then the data dictionary, which is basically one big spreadsheet that contains supposed to be all the fields, but Rob and I went through them, and there was a lot of them that are not there. But you can download the data dictionary there, or in my website on this particular page here, QuickBooks-training.net/QBar data. I actually took that same data dictionary and I posted it on a page. So it's searchable. So if you want to find out, whether a field exists in QBar with a particular piece of information, you can search it through here, and then it will let you know the table that it belongs to, and then the field name. And by the way, if this is completely Chinese to you, this whole concept of table and field name, it will make a lot more sense once you watch more videos about it and once Rob makes the presentation. But this concept of knowing the table and the field, it's crucial. It's very, very important, because QBar is completely based on this concept of table and fields. And then let me go back to the slides here. And then under this long link here, that's a YouTube playlist that contains 6 videos that I created earlier this year. The 3 that Intuit put out, there are a couple of hours each. So it's a total of 9 videos, and these are all completely available for free. So it is a resource for you to learn on your own. So let me move over to give Rob presentation status. And Rob, you can, as soon as you have your screen up, I will confirm, and you can take it over from there. So, yep, it looks like your screen, it's up and running. So, Rob, I'm going to mute myself, and I'm going to run one more polling question before we get started, which is, have you worked with QBar? So just kind of let us know. I would like to understand the percentage of people that have worked with QBar, that some don't even know what this is. So you're patiently awaiting with this long introduction, patiently awaiting to see what it looks like. And a few, I guess, are aware of the existence, and some have played with it. So we do have a few votes in there. If you want to, please, there's no wrong answer. Just vote. Gives us an idea of where you stand. So Robert, I did see your screen, by the way, when you put it up. Let's just wait for this polling question, and we'll show it just to give you an idea where everybody kind of is. That way, that'll let you know the pace and the depth in which you can go into. So we have about 80% of the votes. That's good enough. I'll close the poll and I'll share the results real quick. So we have a big group of people, almost 70%, that it's aware of existence or don't even know what it is. And then a small group have played with it and done a couple things with it, but don't seem to get much there. So Rob, basically really high expectations. Wow us with your presentation. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for that pressure. I don't know if I can truly wow you, but and if you guys have particular questions, if things come up, if I'm going too fast or whatever, just send a note. Use the chat function within GoToWebinar here. Let Hector know, and he'll jump in and ask questions or tell me what to do. All right, so what you guys are looking at is sort of, your vanilla advanced reporting report. Advanced reporting can let you do a lot of different ways of presenting data. Again, I've worked on a lot of reports. The vast majority of people want some sort of operational report where they can manage their inventory better, where they can decide what items are selling and what aren't selling. And so I do a lot of tables, and maybe 90% tables, and then the other 10% are these really cool dashboards that I could show you later if we're really interested in getting into that, with line graphs and box plots and all kinds of cool things that present information quickly, but are more strategic than operational. So what I'm going to do is this is what the end product is going to look like. I'm actually going to just do this. I'm going to get rid of all of these things on the screen, and I'm going to recreate them for you as part of the demonstration here. All right, so I'm going to get rid of these 3 things. At least I think I am. Okay. Let me keep that. Okay. All right. So this is, somewhat like you would see if you just opened up a start from scratch report within advanced reporting. I teach this to people And if this was a real sort of lesson or part of a lesson plan, I would go much more into what's in the interface and what do all these buttons do and everything like that. But I really want to get into more of the sort of demonstration, and hopefully as you go through that, you'll learn things, or at least you'll learn things that you want to learn more about. Okay, so I'm going to start here with a nearly blank screen, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an object. Okay, so all of the things, the two boxes that you see on the screen now are objects, and I'm going to create a new sheet object, which is called a chart. Okay, so this chart, anything that presents data within advanced reporting, or almost anything, is called a chart, and as you can see, a lot of options here for different chart types. And I'm going to do a pivot table, which again is the most commonly used way of presenting the data. So I do next here, okay, and when you create an object, again, you know, by right-clicking here, going to create new object, create a new chart here, okay, it walks you through a sort of wizard for the first time, and then as you edit it, it goes out of wizard mode and just gives you a bunch of tabs to work with. Okay, so I'm creating a chart. So what's a chart? Generally, there are two parts to a chart. The dimensions, which determine how the data is arranged, and then the expressions, which are how you summarize the data, how you, what the numbers are. Generally, expressions are used to do sums or averages or mins or maxes or something like that, whereas the dimensions are every item or every customer or something like that. So let's start out here by making this an item report. So within the screen, you're going to see a big, huge list of fields that are by table. So everything before the dot here is the table that it's in. So customer to do is an individual table, and then type is a field within that table. Okay, so we're going to go, instead of going through this entire list, what I'm going to do is go down and I'm going to only look at the fields that are in the item table. Now you see all of them say item here. And I'm doing this, I want this to be a list with items in it. So I'm going to grab item full name as my first dimension. I'm going to add it over there. All right, and then so that it's a little bit more, gives you a little bit more information, I'm going to create another dimension here, which is going to be item sales description, so that it I mean, at least have some view into what these actual things are. And by the way, this is the wholesale business test file or example file that all of you have access to from within Enterprise. There's some weird things about it that I'll tell you about in a second here, but I didn't want to use anyone's live file for a demonstration for 90 people or so. So I'm going to add sales description in here. So these are going to be the shape of the table. It's going to have it's going to have item, and it's going to have item sales description. And then next we're going to get into the expressions. Okay, and this is literally where people, you know, lose it with advanced reporting with QBAR. They get to this screen and it is blank and they don't know what to do. And you know, there are some ways, there are some shortcuts down here, but generally you end up having to type something in here. So I'm going to start typing, and maybe I'll give you an example of how to use these as well. Okay, but so what we're doing, so the first thing that I want to do now that I have the dimensions is, this is going to be an item report. So maybe the first thing we care about is how many of these things do we have on hand. Okay. So the elements of an expression are as such. So sum equals sum. So any of you who are somewhat familiar with Excel will recognize that as something you could use in Excel too. Then you would put a cell reference or a column reference or whatever in here. It's somewhat similar. There's a very high overlap in these function names and the functions that you use in Excel, to the extent that I wonder if there's been some copyright violation. So it's always, you know, if you're trying to figure out what to do, you can always start with what you know from Excel and hope that works, and usually that does. There's a list down here at the bottom where we can see function categories. And so we have, a bunch of different categories, and then within that, you can go down and find individual functions and then use those in here as well. Okay, so I know some works. Okay, so there are basically three parts to most functions in here. There's the function name, which tells you how it's going to summarize or what it's going to do to the data. Then this next section is what really throws people off, and this is the section where we tell advanced reporting what records that we want to pull for this function. So this is an item report. So the first table we're going to pull from is the item. And for this one, so that we don't have a bunch of blank stuff, we're going to use we're only going to pull active items. Okay, so
You mind zooming in on that real quick, Rob? I wanted to ask you some questions about that right off the bat.
sure.
Because this is again, this is the part that throws everybody off, even throws me off.
Right.
So you started with an open parentheses because everything within the parentheses is going to encompass what you're summing. Then you did an open bracket and a dollar sign and then less than. Is there any logic on why the dollar sign and less than? I mean, just so we can understand why.
Sure.
Instead of just memorizing it, is there any logic behind it?
So Hector, that's a great point. I was actually going to start with some written and then walk you through. Let me finish this up, and then I'm going to walk you through exactly what we're doing on this part. So so we're going to pull active items, and then item type. Okay, this is an inventory report, so we're only going to do inventory items. Okay, all right, and so this section here, and let me go in and zoom in again. Okay. And then everything in here is the part of this sum function that determines what records are actually going to be used for this function. Okay, and so what this means is within here, this squiggly bracket that we have right here means we're starting to define what records we have. Okay, and this squiggly one over here means we're ending that definition. The dollar sign is used in a number of different ways within advanced reporting. In this case, the dollar sign means that we are going to pay attention to any selections that have been made on the sheet itself. So I don't know if you remember seeing the original report, but there were a couple of boxes up top. One was vendor and one was item. And so you can make selections in those boxes that will filter the data in the table. If this is a dollar sign, if this was a 1, for instance, it would not pay attention to any of those selections. So I'm sort of getting into sort of second tier kinds of stuff in terms of the way it works, but that's what this dollar sign means. So there are a number of different symbols we can put. Yes?
Let's see if I understand this. So if you put a 1 there, doesn't matter what you use in a filter, the data will be static. But if you put a dollar sign, it will be dynamic and it will react to the filters. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly right. So the way to think of this is this tells you how to react to the filters, and then everything within the sideways housetops or the carrots or whatever are things that we're going to take exceptions with. So it's saying use what's in the filter, but for item active, it's always going to be a 1, and for item type, it's always going to be some sort of inventory item. Okay, so these two things are the exceptions to this. So you write exceptions, and you can have multiple exceptions within here. You can also then write other exceptions that would work either as a complement to those. So if you could put a plus sign, that means this, or if you put a minus, this and not this. So there are lots of different ways to use sort of this Boolean logic within here to determine what records are pulled. But coming out of this, I just want people to know that this section here is all about what records we're going to use. So we're going to go through the item table, and we're only going to look at items that are active because they have a 1 in the item active field, and we're only going to look at items whose item type starts with inventory. So that would be inventory items and inventory assembly items. Okay, so that for this function, that concludes the records we'll be pulling. Okay. The third major part, so the first major part is what we're going to be doing to the data. The second major part is what data we're going to be pulling. And then the third major part of this function and most function is what actual data are we going to be doing it to, or what field or fields we'll be using to do this. So for this one, we're doing quantity on hand. So again, something from the item table and quantity on hand. And you can see it gives you a list as you type. So I'm just going to hit enter here. And we have now written our first expression here. It only uses data from the item table, and it's a simple sum of this particular field.
And Rob, that's not a historical quantity on hand. That is the current quantity on hand in your item table, correct?
Exactly right. So let's go, let's just call this on hand, and we're gonna finish the table for now. So it doesn't look like much yet, but we've got to start on it. Because this is a pivot table, it allows you to collapse and expand information. So it came in with the item sales description collapsed here, but now we have item on hand, current item quantity on hand by item name and sales description. If we go into QuickBooks here, you know, that's the information. This is your quantity on hand right here, and then here's your sales description right here. Here's your item name, and the full item name is Bath Vanity Fixtures : P3261-06. Okay, so if we go into the report, we're going to find this and this combined. We're going to find this here, Pearl Nickel 5 Light, and we're going to find this quantity on hand of 58. And as Hector said, that's the current quantity on hand as of right now, what you would see within QuickBooks. Okay, so that's our first field. It's relatively simple. So some of the themes for today are, first of all, sort of how things are set up, what the tables are, and such, and then some functions. So we're going to look at some. We're going to look at min and max and count. Okay, and then another theme is what are some of the shortcuts, because this can look, we'll see, more code intensive than most people want to deal with. So I'm going to edit this object again, and to do that, I need to go to Properties. So I right-clicked on it and hit Properties again. All right. So we have on hand. What I'm going to do is right-click on that. I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to paste it. So now I have 2 on hands, but we're going to call this on SO. Okay. And I'm going to double-click on it here to edit it. I could also edit it in this box or click here to bring it up. Okay. So again, the theme of what are the shortcuts and everything like this. To make this one pull data from the SO column or the on SO column instead of the on hand, all I have to do is actually on sales order. I don't have to change anything else because we're still looking at active items. We're still looking at inventory items. All I had to do, we're still summing them. All I had to do was just change this to on sales order.
And there's a question, Rob, about why you're using brackets, and I think I can answer one, so I'll answer that one.
Okay, go ahead.
So not the squiggly bracket, but the actual regular bracket. That's because some expressions have spaces between the words. And if you don't use the brackets, it will stop at, for example, for quantity on hand, it will stop searching at quantity, and then the space means something else. So the bracket is to let it know that the field itself could have spaces. Is that right, Rob? So I make sure I answer that
Well,
correctly.
in a lot of cases, Hector, there's not a really great explanation as for why you do one thing or another in QuickView, and so I don't know if I've explained this. I don't think I have. Anyway, QuickView is the actual program that that Intuit has purchased or licensed, and then they've created a version of it called Advanced Reporting. So one very key thing, and this is on some of the resources that Hector already pointed out, is most of the resources you're going to find about how to do what we're doing right now will be under QuickView resources as opposed to QBAR or advanced reporting resources. So if you're searching for how to write the sum function, you're better off Googling QuickView, which is K-L-I-K
Q,
view.
right?
Sorry, Q. You're right. QuickView sum function, and you'll find thousands of hits on how to use the sum function as opposed to QBAR sum function or advanced reporting sum function, where you will not find as much information. But anyway, the squigglies, so squigglies are used in this case in the set analysis portion, and this is, again, let me zoom in here. You know, this is this whole area between the first squiggly and the last squiggly is called the set analysis, okay? And right there. And the reason you use squigglies here is because that delineates, sort of what you said, Hector, delineates that this whole, it's looking for exactly this between the squigglies right here. Okay, so for inventory, and you're right, if I had put a space before this star, it wouldn't work because item type has no spaces in it. So, you know, there are people who do a lot of QuickBooks reporting who have told me that they don't want to deal with advanced reporting for this exact reason. Like, when do I use a squiggly? I don't have to use squigglies when I'm writing SQL code. You know, when do I use a square bracket? When do I use a squiggly? When do I use double quotes? When do I use single quotes? These are all sort of QuickView specific things. They add to the power of QuickView in order to be able to, you know, the fact that you can use double quotes and single quotes in different situations, that makes it more flexible and powerful. But unfortunately, you have to learn it to know when to use what and why it gets screwed up if you don't use the right one. So, you know, I sometimes put these things into that's just the way QuickView is category. Often it's because you need to have a lot of different ways of delineating things because it's power makes it more powerful or makes it better able to handle different situations. All right, so I hope I answered that question. I'm going to get out of here. We're going to go back, and now we see we have our on SO. All we had to do was just change these few words here. We didn't have to change anything else. So again, you know, the theme of what are the shortcuts? Do I have to type this all out, or do I have to put this all together all at the same time? Okay. Another shortcut. So let's look at the report here. So now we have, I drag this out. Okay, we can see on hand, and then we have our on sales order column. All right, so anyone who uses the inventory stock status report would know that the next field is going to be your available. So let's add in that. And so this is going to be a different thing that we're going to do. All right, so we're going to add a new field here, and you'll see it comes up blank. So one shortcut within QuickView and advanced reporting is that we can now refer to these other fields. So let me reduce this down. So you can see we already have two expressions here, on hand and on SO. So we calculate available as on hand minus on SO. All right, we don't have to then rewrite these functions or put all of the code from those two things in here. We can simply do math using the field names now that we've created those expression fields. All right, so let's just call this available. And you see it shows up here. All right, 69 versus 0, 10 minus 15 and everything. All right, so again, that's another shortcut, the ability to refer to fields or refer to expressions once we've already created them. Okay, all right, let's do one more of the sort of standard inventory stock status. And I'm going to, instead of reinventing the wheel, I'm going to copy again and I'm going to paste. And this is going to be on our PO. For some reason, for POs, they just called it on order instead of on purchase order. So again, just taking out sales from that gives me the amount that's on purchase order. And let's change that here to PO. Okay. And so now we have, you know, sort of the basics of the inventory stock status report. So I do a lot of, in discussing this earlier with Hector, you know, I do a ton of commission reporting. That's probably the largest category of reports that I do. The second largest category is inventory reporting. Inventory reporting, you know, everything from sort of, can you reproduce the inventory stock status report by item or by location or by site, you know, to let's create statistical models to model how much an item is selling more or less every month. You know, so what's the slope of the sales curve, and let's use that to project what our inventory is going to be 3, 4, 5, 6 months down the road. So there are infinite variations. You know, what's our running total going to be when you take into account POs and sales orders? So tons of things we can do. One of the more common requests is, I want to know how many weeks or months of inventory I have on hand or available. Okay, so there are some steps that we need to go through, or some things that we need to code in to make that determination. I'm going to edit our table again, and I'm going to add a new field. I'm not going to copy anything because I'm going to be doing a lot of this fresh. We are going to be using sum again. Okay. So the first thing that I want to add in here, well, let's put in our set analysis code. Again, we want this to be affected by any selections we make otherwise in the report. So we're going to use that $sign, but then we're going to use this caret to make an exception here. In this case, we're looking at sales. So we're going to look at a different table, and probably the most important table in advanced reporting is the transactions table. So again, everything before that period is the table, and in this case, it's the transactions table. Transactions table has every transaction that goes on within QuickBooks. And so when you do an invoice, it gets translated into a journal entry. Advanced reporting takes all of those journal entries and puts them together. So you can think of the transactions table as a massive stack of journal entries. So we're going to do transaction type here. And we're going to only look at certain transaction types that pertain to sales. So sales receipt, okay, invoice. And then we're also going to do credit memos. So if they've had any returns, we want to include that, as we want to net that out of any sales that we want, that are going to show up here. So again, we're using a different table. We're using transactions. We're looking at individual transaction types. Okay. We still, this will be somewhat familiar to you, or item type. We only want to, we're only want to look at inventory items. We don't care about sales for other types of items. Let's put the Y on there. All right, and we only want to look at active inventory items again. So the interesting thing here is that we're telling advanced reporting what records we want, but we can treat the credit, or we can treat the transaction table and the item table as sort of one big long record because they're connected. They're connected by item name. So every record in the transactions table that has a particular item name is connected to that item's record within the item table. So if you think about it, you can think of it as just sort of one giant wide spreadsheet with all of these columns, and the item columns are then attached to the transaction type columns by item name. So we can use filters that work with both of them. All right, and so let's do only active items here.
So Rob, so I just want to kind of translate that into English, if you don't mind. So what you're saying is that you have a transaction like an invoice that contains an item. The transaction itself, from a visual perspective, doesn't include any specific attributes of the item, such as it being active or not. But we can pull them from QBar. We can pull attributes from the item that was used in a specific transaction, even though that attribute may not be visually visible in the transaction itself when we're working inside QuickBooks. Is that what you're kind of saying?
You're so much better than I am at saying that. Yes,
Just
yes,
trying. Just trying.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And yeah, I mean, and so when you're people who have worked with databases before, and the best example of most people have used Access to do this. You know, in Access, you will join tables together based upon like fields. So you might have an item table in Access, and you can join that to a transactions table. And then for all intents and purposes, those things are joined at the hip. So any attribute about an item you can use even when you're querying the transactions table, because again, it's sort of created one long row in the spreadsheet that now has all of the data on it instead of just the stuff from the transactions table or just the stuff from the item table. So, you know, maybe just forget whatever I said and just listen to Hector on that one. All right, so again, we're grabbing some stuff from the item table here. All right, and now we're going to go back and have it filter on the account type used within these transactions. So as you know, when you're doing an invoice for a inventory item or an assembly item, and you look at what happens in the background when you do Control Y to look at an invoice, or say look at the journal or see view journal or whatever, that invoice actually has multiple lines for that particular item. There's the line that attributes the income, and there's a line that takes the value out of inventory and then moves that value to cost of goods sold. So if we didn't put this in here, we would actually be grabbing all three of those lines. But I'm just going to say, let's just look at the income line on here, because that's the one that has what we want on it, and we're not going to be repeating things. Okay. So these things can get rather long when you're talking about the transactions table, because there are a lot of things in the transactions table that are define parts of the transaction, define the status of the transaction. So one of the status fields is the transactions pending flag. Okay, we don't want to take anything that's pending, so we're going to use that. That's going to be 0. Okay, all right. The next thing we want to do is we want to tell QBar that we only want to look at certain transaction dates. So generally what people want to do is either look at the last 6 months for sales, look at the last year for sales, or actually use some sort of input box where they'll say, Rob, I want to be able to say, you know, for this item, I'm going to use 3 months, and then I'm going to rerun it with 5 months for other items and stuff like that. So I'm not going to get into too much detail here. but I am going to put a filter in here for transaction date. And this is, this is going to be complex. What I'm doing is I'm then creating a set of sort of Boolean criteria that will define the span of the dates that I want. I'm sure no one really is following me on this. But anyway, so there's a whole syntax that you have to do when you want to write complex criteria. So this is a simple criterion here, income. This is simple. This is going to be more complex here. And so what I want to do is say that the date is going to be greater than or equal to. I have to use a $ here because now I'm going to have it calculate something. And I'm going to use the date function because I'm going to calculate a date here. Normally in a report like this, I would do something like this. Today, all right? Today minus 365. Unfortunately, I'm using the example file, the wholesale example file, and they've put all of their transactions out in 21 and 20. So I can't do that, but this is just an example of some of the functions that you can use to pull in other information. So like what's our current date is one of the things. You'll see up in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, I've actually created a variable that I'm going to do. So this is saying I want everything to be greater than or equal to this report date that I've determined, which is 12/31/2020 minus 365. And then I want everything to be less than or equal to report date. And again, I have to get it to use the $sign so that it can interpret that report date. It's called the $sign reveal, which sounds sort of strange. All right, so here's this more complex logic that I can use to determine what dates are going to be pulled for this. Okay, so it's going to be greater than or equal to the report date minus a year, and it's going to be less than or equal to the report date itself. All right, so this is the logic that we use, and I'm sorry this is a very long one. This is the longest one that we're going to have, but I hope you sort of at least see. I don't think you are going to memorize how to do this or what these all do, but you can sort of see why they make sense. So I end all of the set analysis functions. So again, that's everything, from the first dollar or from that first squiggly bracket all the way after report date there is the set analysis. And again, that's telling QBAR what records to pull. All right. And so within the transactions table, there are two very important fields, amount with sign and quantity with sign. We're looking at inventory quantities, so I'm going to use quantity with sign. Okay, so the with sign part is important because for these credit memos, those are going to be negatives. For the sales receipts and invoices, those are going to be positive. It's going to add up all the sales receipts and invoices. It's going to subtract out the credit memos because we're using this quantity with sign field. Okay, so assuming I haven't made a mistake in typing all of this out, we'll see what comes up here. I'm going to not give it a name right now. All right, so this is basically for this particular item, we've sold 79 in the last year.
So Rob, I want to give a little bit of context first. Could you open up QuickBooks real quick if you don't mind?
Sure.
Because at this point it's important to look at QuickBooks and kind of see what's going on. Pull up a stock status by item report. So what you essentially did was you created part of this report, and then you added a rolling quantity of sales for the last 12 months, which if you scroll all the way down on the standard QuickBooks report, the closest thing to get to that, it's sales per week. And that is so arbitrary how they figure out that was what we wanted, and you can't change that. So what you essentially did is take two reports you would have to build manually. One would be sort of a sales by item report in which you only use the quantities, and the inventory stock status report, and merged it into one. So I just wanted to give some context in terms of what all that means. Now that 3.7 sales per week, I mean, you could actually sit there and multiply that times 52 and get some sort of number. The problem is we don't even know how QuickBooks computes that sales per week number really. But if you take 3.7 times 52, you get about 192. But if you go into QBar, if you want to switch back to QBar, the actual real sales was 79. So who knows how QuickBooks calculates that? I think it's the last 6 weeks used, but this is actually much more precise because you get the actual real number for the past year that it was used.
Right, right. And like I said, you can, certainly people have asked me, instead of using hard dates, let me specify what dates I want to use for this average. Maybe I only care about the last 6 months because I did some marketing campaign, and the period prior to that, isn't instructive. So, what QBar gives you the ability to do is have much more, almost infinite flexibility in how you do this. So the vast majority, like I said, the vast majority of the reports I do are tables like this, and the vast majority of that is I take the inventory stock status report and then I mix it with a report on sales, and then I mix it with this and everything like that, and then I have to manually rearrange and everything like that. And it's all about, I try and do it with the regular reporting, but there are just things that are different that I want to do. And so that's what, QBar was basically designed to do, is to give you almost infinite flexibility on how you pull these numbers and how you arrange them. So I'm going to go back and I'm just going to call this annual sales here.
And just for the heck of it, could you duplicate that annual sales and then divide the whole thing by 12 and get the average monthly sales?
I was actually going to do weekly for my demo, but I can, yes. So we can actually do this. So let's use an example of a shortcut here, Hector. So let's do equals annual sales divided by 12.
Beautiful.
All right. And we can call this monthly sales. All right, so now we have,
even with a little bit of like sort of mathematical knowledge, you could pull that report and show the average for the last month, the last 3 months, the last year, and then see a moving average so you can actually see the speed of sales and stuff like that. So if you were to apply a little bit of that, statistical math knowledge, you could even do something like that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's it all comes down to math. So if you can think of what you want to do, how you want to transform the numbers, the math part is actually the easy part, because we all generally know how to calculate an average or how to calculate sales per something. And so that's the fun part, is actually then doing the math in here. The majority of people are going to take something like this and they're going to hit the Excel button and it's going to pop out into Excel, and then they're going to do some further manipulation. So that's just sort of a given on any of these reports. Okay, so really at this point, I just want to do a couple more things to make it, get to the point where this would be a report that someone would find value from. And I'm going to add in another expression here. So Hector wanted me to calculate monthly sales, so that's fine. So let's figure out from this how many more months of inventory we have on hand, and how many more months of available inventory we have on hand. And again, it's simple because we've already written the code for that. So let's do on hand, okay, divided by monthly sales. All right. And then in the interest of time, let's call this months on hand. All right, and let's just copy this now and change this, take on hand out, change this to available. All right. So this is going to tell me, several things here. How much danger am I in of running out? Oops, let me format these so they're easier to see. Am I in danger of running out? Or in other cases, do I have way too much? Do I really need to have 14 months worth of textured white pendant, whatever that is, or am I just spending money to keep that inventory around, or 17 months of this? All right, so again, we're just doing it based upon things we've already calculated, this monthly sales number, the on-hand number, the available number, which itself is a calculation. All right, so once we get sort of the basics here, we can then do these sort of more important things people would normally, download reports into Excel to calculate. So at this point, I'm going to stop sort of demonstrating. I'll bring up the final report again. I'll just show you a couple of things, and then I will let you go since you have been so patient here. So I'm going to close this, and I'm going to bring up, let's see here, sorry. There's a bug in QBar. All right, so let's bring up the final version here, demo version 2. And let's just look at a few more things. You can see I used weeks on hand and weeks available. Again, that's a buyer's choice. So I did a few other things here that are, again, from the standpoint of I'm looking to learn more about my inventory. I want to know what's selling, what's not selling, what maybe I need to put on sale to get rid of, or what I need to just liquidate. All right, so some things we might do there is we might calculate how many customers have bought the item. When was the last time we sold it? This is not particularly interesting because it's a test file, so they're all within the few month period here, but you would see this looking different in a real file here. How many times have I sold it? Have I sold it once, twice? I've only sold this 3 times, okay? This is the next time it's gonna be delivered, so if I've got POs over here, on PO, you're gonna see delivery dates over here. And then these are versions of this annual sales using different dates in that long date box that I showed you. So let me just show you the functions that we use, and then I'll let you go here. So in the expressions here, so last sold, this is going to look pretty familiar. This a lot of the same code we used for annual sales, except we're using a max here. So what was the maximum date when this was sold? All right, so max transaction date based upon these records, these invoice and sales receipt records. So all we really did was get rid of the dates, change this from a sum to a max, and we changed this to transaction date. Customers, we used a different function. We used, most of this is exactly the same as the last one. We used count, and then we used customer full name, and then we put in this distinct. I only want to count different names, okay? So again, minor changes to this or no change to this, we change the function, we put in a different field that we're gonna calculate on, and we're using, in this case, distinct.
And just curious, Rob, if in the distinct function, if you used, instead of customer full name, if you would have used just the customer name without the job, it would count how many customers without counting the individual jobs, correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, it would really depend upon whether you had any redundancies in their actual name. In most cases, the number is going to come out exactly the same. If we didn't use that distinct, what that's basically going to do is count the number of transactions, because it's just going to count the number of times it sees a customer name. The distinct really says that it's going to aggregate them all together and figure out which ones are unique.
Which could be valuable in itself, right? I mean, total number of transactions has its own value in its own right.
Yeah, no, and that's what time sold is. Okay, so if you look at time sold, we're using count, we're using the same distinct thing here, all right, and then we're looking at transactions, transaction ID. So every transaction in advanced reporting has its own unique ID, and so we're looking at unique IDs of these transactions. So this is time sold. next delivery, this was a little bit different, but now we do have to change a lot of things for this one, and I won't go through all of it, but we're using the min function, not the max that we saw earlier. We're looking at purchase orders that haven't been received, okay, and we're then using the expected date down here so that we can look at, it's going to go through and it's going to look for all of these items, what the next expected date is for a non-closed, non-received purchase order, and that's going to tell us when we can expect our next shipment. So next delivery. Another thing that's on the inventory stock status report that sometimes people don't see or don't pay attention to. So the point of this last is that we can swap in function names, we can swap in some fields and everything like that, but a lot of this is basically the same heart of the expressions that we're writing. So anyway, as Hector said, shoot an email. What I'll do is I'll send you a version of this report that will be set up to actually run correctly on a live file. So I'll get rid of this report date. I'll change the date references to today so that it calculates correctly, or so that it calculates what you're expecting it to calculate.
Yeah, maybe do both, the one with the sample and the one without. That way we can test it on both, if you don't mind.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, Rob, real quick before I let you go, because you did allude to a graph. Is there a quick graph you can create with the data that's up there? Maybe sales by item, top sales by item, or something like that in a graph.
All right, so let's clone this here. You're putting me under pressure.
Yeah, sorry about that.
I'm going to get rid of a lot of this stuff here. Let's just get rid of that. Yeah, this is not hugely. You know what? Instead of doing this, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a new sheet object. We're going to do a chart. Okay, so let's just do a simple bar chart here. All right, and let's do something from, let's do it on sales reps. All right, so we've got sales reps. Let's use the sales rep entity full name. So what we're going to do is sales by sales rep. All right, so that's our dimension. So that's what's going to be along the bottom. Then we go over to here and we're going to calculate something. What we're going to calculate is some, we'll use the sheet expressions if we need to, and then we're going to say transactions, account type equals income. Okay, and that's pretty much it. I mean, we can do this, we can fine tune it, we can only do real sales transactions and everything like this. This could include journals that affect the income line, but let's just do it this way.
Journals wouldn't be, because that doesn't have a rep.
Oh, you're right. You're right. Thank you. That was a bad example. All right, amount with sign. Okay. All right, so simple function here, and let's take a look at what we get. All right, so this file doesn't have many sales reps, but this is lifetime sales for these reps. To just demonstrate here, if I then filter out just these specific items, you'll see that this is going to change. It actually didn't change because I probably selected about the majority of them. But you can see now the lines have all changed, and this table has changed because we're only looking at their sales for these particular, or their income for these particular items. So that's how these things work. These filter boxes up here, they affect every item on here. And just, since you set me free, Hector, I'm going to do this. And if I change this to a 1, this goes back to the way it was when I'd made no selections, but because I don't have any 1s in here, this data remains filtered by this box.
That's great, Rob. By the way, Rob, thank you very much for this presentation. No one in the history of QuickBooks has given so much on QBar, because I tell you, I go to almost every conference that there is, and some people attempt to teach this. I attempted to teach this. It's not easy. It's not easy, and it's gotten better. I see that you're working on it and it's really stable. A couple of versions ago, this thing would crash every 5 minutes. So I do like I'm starting to really enjoy what this tool can do, and partly it's because of what you demonstrated and what you've done for some of my customers. So I really appreciate that, Rob, and hopefully maybe in a few months we'll have you back if you got some interesting things to show on the report side.
Very good. Thank you very much, Hector, and thank you everybody for paying attention.
Just so you guys know in the audience, I had to convince Rob to give up this report as part of the presentation. So because Rob said, well, it took me like 100 hours to put this report together. Why would I give it away for free? I'm like, well, Rob, give away something, right? So he's going to give away that report. So I'll put his email up in the screen. So if you actually do need it, you can just email him and he'll send you the full report, the first one that he showed. But Rob, do you have an extra 10, 15 minutes to finish out the entire report?
Yeah, that's fine. And I can, I mean, what I want, I've sort of planned it so that if I can spend maybe 5 more minutes and get to the heart of it, and then, just sort of not bore you with the rest of the details. If you want to get the report, as Hector said, just shoot me an email or shoot an email to the email address that Hector's going to show, and you can get the full thing.
This is Rob's email. So if you email him, he will send you that particular report. So it's Robert at qbkaccounting.com. That forwards straight to his email, and it also sends me a copy. I'm just very curious to see the kind of questions that people get. So, I'm kind of learning this process with Robert as well. Anyway, if you are going to leave at the top of the hour, just keep in mind the next episode would be September 20th, and it would be what's new on QuickBooks Enterprise 2018. So we'll be talking about all the new features for QuickBooks Enterprise 2018. And then October 18th, we'll do a deep dive into time entries inside QuickBooks Enterprise. If you're watching this live on the webinar, you don't have to do anything. You get the invitation automatically. If you're watching this in a YouTube recording, go to Enterprise.Expert and click on the register button. The other webinars I'll be involved with is next week on Thursday. We'll be doing QuickBooks Online Advanced Tips in QB Power Hour. We'll be talking on October 18th. We'll be doing something completely not related to QuickBooks. We're going to bring a guest speaker to compare Snapchat and Instagram for small business marketing. On November 1st at 12 p.m., we'll do a bit on international taxation issues. We're going to have a guest speaker that's an expert on international taxation for U.S. people and non-U.S. people. And then on the same November 1st, we'll be doing Excel charts and graphs. So all the webinars that I give, they're still free, unbelievably enough, still given away for free. So just go to hectorgarcia.com/webinars to attend that. And like I said, join the Facebook group, and my email is hector@garciacpa.com if you have any questions.